My name is Penelope, and for 32 years I was my mother's punching bag. Not her physical one, her words did the damage. Every sentence she ever spoke to me carried a hook, a sting, a reminder that I was never good enough. Growing up, our house looked perfect from the outside, manicured lawn, Christmas lights straight from a catalog. Inside, it was a war zone you couldn't see. Mom didn't hit me. She didn't have to. She used shame like a scalpel, slicing until I doubted my right to breathe. If I brought home an A, she asked why it wasn't an A+. If I won first place at the science fair, she stood in the crowd with her arms crossed and whispered afterward, "Your handwriting ruined the presentation. Don't act so proud." When I graduated high school as a speaker, she leaned close and hissed, "That dress makes your shoulders wide. Everyone's going to notice." That was my childhood, applause from strangers, daggers from Mom. My father sat behind his newspaper and pretended not to hear. Silence was his survival. Mine was obedience. But the thing about silence is, it builds pressure. And one night, at Thanksgiving dinner, in front of neighbors and family friends, Mom raised her wineglass and called me her biggest mistake. And for the first time in my life, I didn't shrink. I fought back. Before I tell you what I said, and what I did after, drop a comment. Have you ever been humiliated by your own parent? Subscribe, because what comes next isn't just survival. It's revenge, and the day I finally burned down the script she forced me to live in. I didn't grow up in a house. I grew up in a performance. Every morning was a dress rehearsal Mom directed and I failed. Breakfast wasn't about food, it was an inspection line. The toast had to be the color of pleasant. The orange juice couldn't have pulp because pulp was sloppy. I learned to sit with my knees together, ankles crossed, shoulders back, chin tucked, like I was always about to be photographed for a brochure titled "This is what a good daughter looks like." "Smile," Mom would say, not looking at me but at my reflection in the microwave door. "Not so wide. Think grateful, not greedy." I practiced that smile the way other kids practiced cartwheels. It felt like holding a glass in my mouth. Don't bite too hard, don't drop it, don't you dare spill. If I brought home an A, she tapped the paper with a manicured nail and murmured, "An A is a ceiling for girls who don't push." If I came second, her brows lifted, sympathetic and sharp, "Second is proof you weren't trying." When I won first, she leaned in and whispered, "Don't gloat. No one likes a girl who needs attention." The target moved every time I got close. That was the point. You can't rest if love is always 1 inch out of reach. At 9, I made the solar system for the science fair, wire coat hangers, foam balls, a ringed Saturn I argued with for 2 nights until it finally balanced. Mom stood in the auditorium with her arms folded like a judge. When I won, the principal shook my hand, and flashbulbs made little white flowers in my eyes. I remember looking through those flowers to find my mother's face. She was already frowning. "Jupiter is misshapen," she told the principal, her voice sweet as tea. But Penelope is learning to accept feedback. On the drive home she slid the ribbon into the glove compartment and said, "First impressions count. Your handwriting on those cards was a mess." I pressed my palms to my thighs so I wouldn't touch the ribbon. I was afraid my fingers would leave oil on it and then she'd have 2 reasons to be disappointed. Piano lessons were supposed to be polish. I wanted to be loud. I wanted to pound the keys until the notes were a storm in the living room. Mom insisted on scales and metronomes and hands that floated like birds. After recitals she hugged other people's kids and critiqued me. "You rush the middle," she'd say in my ear while smiling for someone else's camera. "And your bows are awkward. Practice in the mirror." I stood bowing to my own reflection at night until my lower back burned. Holidays were the most dangerous. Our house glowed like a magazine spread, garlands on the stair rail, matching stockings, cinnamon simmering on the stove. The air itself felt lacquered. I loved the lights, tiny constellations I could almost believe in, but they lit every flaw. If a bulb flickered, I replaced it before she noticed. If a bow sagged, I remade it with my fists clenched so the loops would match. Mom didn't have to shout, she had a glance that said, "You embarrass me." It landed like a slap you couldn't prove. Sometimes she didn't say anything at all. The silent treatment was her real orchestra. For days I would talk into a void, "Good morning, I cleaned the kitchen, I'm going to school," and the air would stay flat. No answer. I'd count the sounds she made to feel less invisible, the knife on the cutting board, the dishwasher door, the click of her heels down the hall. When she finally spoke, it was always something small. "You left a water ring on the table." And I would cry, not because of the table, but because the world had a voice again and it chose to scold me first. Dad learned to live in the negative space. He hid behind the morning paper like it was a shield, murmured "Listen to your mother" without looking up, perfected the art of arriving late and leaving early. Once, when I was 12, I asked him in the garage why he never defended me. He stared at the lawnmower as if it were a patient on an operating table and said, "It's easier this way." Easier for whom went unanswered. Mom loved triangulation. She collected other people's daughters the way some people collect teacups, delicately, publicly. "Did you hear about Emily? Early admission to Yale. Her mother must be so proud." Or, "Grace is so poised. She knows how to choose flattering silhouettes." She'd look at me, head tilted like she was studying a specimen. "You could learn from that." She never said "You're a disappointment." She didn't have to. She built a museum around the idea and made me buy a ticket to it every day. When I was 13, I danced in a winter recital with a fever. I told her I felt sick. She said I was being dramatic. On stage, the lights were hot as summer, and the world tilted. I stumbled, caught the backdrop, and brought part of it down in a gasp of Velcro and fabric. The audience made a sound I still hear in my bones, something between a laugh and a pitying "oh." Backstage, I swallowed tears and waited for Mom to gather me up. She stood at the door with her purse strap twisted tight in her fist. The drive home was a punishment made of silence. At the house she didn't touch me, she wiped a non-existent smudge from the counter and said, "Grace is a choice." High school was an economy of grudges. If I stayed in to study, I was antisocial. If I went out, I was careless. If I dated a boy who treated me kindly, she called him safe like it was an insult. If I kissed someone with a rougher edge, she called me reckless. I learned to apologize before I was accused. I learned to anticipate before I was asked. I learned to read rooms because I didn't live in one, I survived one. The worst part wasn't the criticism, it was the counterfeits. Every so often, with guests over, Mom would stroke my hair and say, "I don't know what I'd do without her." It was a line delivered for applause, but my chest would expand like a balloon anyway. I'd float for a whole evening on those 8 words. Then, after the door closed and the dishwasher hummed, she'd mention the dust I missed on the baseboards and the way I chattered at dinner. The balloon popped quietly. I'd sweep up the pieces alone. There were bright spots. My English teacher, Mrs. Hart, who wrote "Your voice matters" in the margin of my essay and underlined it twice. The neighbor, Mr. Alvarez, who fixed our mailbox for free and told me I was sharp as a tack when I pointed out a wiring issue he'd missed. I hoarded those moments like contraband candy under the bed. I rationed them. I didn't tell Mom, I didn't want her to confiscate the only sugar I had. By senior spring, I knew how to disappear in plain sight. I could laugh in photos and cry in the shower without making a sound. I could eat exactly enough to be disciplined but not enough to be indulgent. I could leave a room before I said the wrong thing. When I got into a good school 3 states away, Mom kissed my cheek and said, "Boston is cold. You'll come home." I smiled that polished microwave door smile and said nothing. The acceptance letter burned a little hole in my pocket that felt like heat from a tiny sun. On graduation day, when I walked across the stage, the auditorium tilted again, but not because I was sick. For those 5 minutes on stage, I could pretend the applause belonged to me and not to her myth of me. I looked out and saw my classmates, my teachers, a few parents wiping tears. I found Mom in the crowd. Her lips were pressed flat. Her eyes were glass. She was waiting to correct me. I finished, bowed, in the mirror perfect arc she demanded, and heard Mrs. Hart's voice in my head, "Your voice matters." It was the first time the words landed inside me instead of sliding off. I packed for Boston with surgical precision. Towels rolled tight, books stacked, clothes folded the way she'd taught me to avoid criticism. Dad carried boxes without comment. Mom hovered in the doorway of my room, picking at imaginary lint on my duvet. "College is full of girls who think they're special," she said finally. "Don't embarrass yourself." I loaded the last box, closed the trunk, and hugged her. She smelled like expensive hand cream and winter apples. "I'll call when I get there," I said. "Don't call too late," she answered. "Sleep is important for your skin." In the rearview mirror, the house stood framed by the porch and the hydrangeas like a picture I could take or leave. I left it. But the soundtrack came with me, the metronome of her voice, the rhythm of correction, the drum of my own heart learning how to keep time without a conductor. People ask why I stayed so long, why I kept contorting myself. Here's the truth: children don't leave because it hurts, they leave when the hope hurts more. As long as I believed there was a version of me Mom could love, I stayed on my toes, balancing on that promise like a wire. It would take years, and one brutal Thanksgiving, for me to understand the wire was connected to nothing. Leaving home didn't feel like freedom. It felt like holding my breath underwater and finally breaking the surface. Boston wasn't just miles away, it was states away. For the first time I could breathe without her voice echoing in every room. I moved into a dorm with walls painted a dull beige and thought, even this is better. Because beige doesn't criticize. Beige doesn't sigh when you get it wrong. Beige just lets you exist. For the first time I decorated a space without Mom's commentary. Posters, fairy lights, even a chipped mug I bought at a thrift shop because it looked happy. My roommate raised an eyebrow, but I smiled anyway. That mug was rebellion. In classes, professors praised my work. Not the hollow kind of praise that comes with a correction hidden in it, real praise. "Excellent analysis, strong insight, you should consider publishing." Each word landed like water on cracked soil. I drank it in, almost desperate. But every time someone complimented me, I felt Mom's shadow whispering, "Don't gloat. Don't believe them. They don't really mean it." Dating was worse. I didn't know how to trust affection. The first boy who told me I was beautiful made me panic. Beautiful? That word belonged to other girls, to the Emily's and Grace's Mom compared me to. When he touched my hand, I waited for the correction. "Not like that. Not enough. Too much." 2 years in, I fell in love, or what I thought was love, with a boy named David. He was kind, patient, the kind of person who held doors without thinking twice. He told me I deserved the world. And I smiled while a voice in my head screamed, "No you don't. You never will." The relationship ended the same way all of mine did, with me pushing him away before he could see what was broken. "You build walls," he said in our last fight. "I can't scale them forever." I didn't tell him the walls weren't built for him. They were built to survive her. I thought adulthood would fix me. That distance would silence her. But the truth is, you don't escape someone like my mother by moving to another state. You carry her voice like a parasite in your skin. When I got my first job in marketing, I called home with cautious pride. "Account coordinator on a big brand," I told her. "It's a good firm." There was a pause. Then, "Janine's daughter just got into Harvard Law." "But congratulations, dear." I hung up and stared at the phone until my hand shook. I wanted to scream, "Why can't you just be proud?" But I didn't. I went for a run, pounding the pavement until my lungs burned, trying to outrun a ghost I couldn't see. Therapy saved me. A friend dragged me to Dr. Williams after watching me spiral into panic over a dinner invitation. "She's good," my friend promised. "She'll help you sort your head out." Dr. Williams was small, silver-haired, with eyes that saw through me. She listened as I explained the rules of my childhood: no bragging, no mistakes, no space for joy, and she didn't argue. She just said, "That sounds exhausting." Exhausting. The word cracked me open. For years I thought I was weak for feeling tired. But she made it sound like a logical result of carrying a burden too heavy for too long. Week by week, she helped me see the truth: my mother's cruelty wasn't a reflection of my flaws. It was a reflection of hers. That didn't erase the damage. I still checked mirrors for approval I'd never get. I still flinched at imagined criticism. But therapy planted a seed. Maybe I wasn't the problem. Maybe I was the proof of hers. And yet, despite all the clarity, some part of me still hoped. Hoped that one day Mom would look at me and just say, "I'm proud of you." That hope was the hook in my chest, the chain I dragged into every room. Which is why, when the phone rang one autumn evening and she asked me to come home for Thanksgiving, I said yes. I should have known better. But hope makes fools of daughters. The call came on a Tuesday night while I was bent over spreadsheets for a new client campaign. My phone lit up with a name that always made my stomach tighten: Mom. Normally, I'd let it go to voicemail. Normally, I'd wait until I'd rehearsed my tone, my lines, my armor. But that night I picked up. Her voice was soft, almost sweet. "Penelope, you should come home for Thanksgiving this year. Just a small gathering. The Petersons, the new neighbors, the Johnsons, you remember Walter and Margaret, don't you?" It wasn't what she said. It was what she didn't say. No criticisms, no sighs, no backhanded comments about my job or my clothes. Just an invitation. For a moment, I let myself believe. Maybe she had changed. Maybe that tiny sliver of tenderness I'd glimpsed earlier wasn't an accident. Maybe she was ready to be a mother. "I'll think about it," I said, keeping my voice level. But inside, hope scratched like a feral thing, begging me to say yes. The next day, I found myself wandering boutique aisles in Boston, searching for the perfect hostess gift. I knew the rules: nothing that could outshine her, nothing she could twist into competition. A bottle of Cabernet from Napa, expensive but not flashy. Artisan chocolates wrapped in understated gold paper. Calculated generosity, designed to look effortless. Clothes were harder. I tried on 10 dresses, discarding each one in the fitting room. Too bright, too plain, too much cleavage, too matronly. Every time I looked in the mirror, I saw her voice reflected back. "That color washes you out. That cut makes you look broad. Trying too hard again, aren't you?" I settled on a burgundy sweater dress, safe, classic, the kind of thing she might not hate. I paired it with modest heels, subtle gold jewelry. And then, because I knew better, I booked a hotel in Philadelphia, one I could escape to if the evening turned into another war zone. My last therapy session before the trip was all strategy. Dr. Williams leaned forward in her chair, hands clasped like she was praying for me. "Remember, Penelope," she said, "you can't control how she behaves. Only how you respond. What are your exit strategies?" I rattled them off like multiplication tables. I can excuse myself to the restroom. I can step outside. I can remind myself she doesn't own my truth. And if she crosses the line? I swallowed. I leave. Dr. Williams nodded. "Exactly. You are not a child anymore. You don't have to endure cruelty to prove you're strong. Leaving is strength." I repeated it to myself all the way home. Leaving is strength. Leaving is strength. But in the quiet, another voice whispered, "What if this time is different?" The drive to Philadelphia was long enough to rehearse every scenario. Compliments that turned into digs. Accidental stories from my childhood twisted into comedy. Comparisons to someone else's golden child. I spoke my prepared lines out loud in the car. "That's not helpful. Let's change the subject. I'm not comfortable with that comment." They sounded strong when it was just me and the steering wheel. But I knew the second I crossed that threshold, the air would thicken. Old reflexes would claw at me, the urge to shrink, to placate, to appease. Still, I drove on. When I pulled up in front of the house I grew up in, it looked exactly the same: red brick, white shutters, a wreath on the door arranged with military precision. To the outside world, it was perfect. Inside, I knew, waited the minefield. Mom opened the door before I could knock. Her cream sweater was immaculate, her silver blonde hair styled like she was stepping onto a magazine cover. And then, unthinkable, she hugged me. Not long, not tight. But an embrace. "Come in before you let all the heat out," she said with a smile that almost looked genuine. For a heartbeat, I believed. For a heartbeat, I was 9 years old again, desperate for approval, dizzy at the chance. I stepped inside. The house smelled like roasted turkey, cinnamon, cloves. Holiday warmth, designed to lull. My father sat in the living room with the guests, half-smile plastered on his face, as disengaged as ever. Introductions followed, the Petersons, polite and awkward. The Johnsons, new neighbors, clearly uneasy in the undercurrent. Mom beamed, her voice sweet as sugar when she introduced me. "This is my daughter, Penelope. She works in advertising up in Boston." The word advertising came out like hobby. Before I could respond, she added, "Their son just became VP of strategy at a tech firm in New York. At 34. Isn't that something?" There it was, the first cut. Not 5 minutes through the door. I smiled at the Johnsons. "Congratulations. That's a huge achievement." Linda Johnson smiled back, relief flickering in her eyes like she'd just witnessed the first battle in a war she didn't sign up for. In the kitchen, the mask dropped. Mom hovered over me while I arranged crackers on a tray. "You're spacing them too far apart," she said, reaching around to fix them herself. Then, her gaze slid over me. "That dress looks a little snug. Have you been stress eating again?" My lungs tightened. I forced myself to breathe evenly. "It's supposed to be fitted, Mom. And I've actually been working with a trainer." She made a noncommittal hum, already moving on. "The Johnson's son just bought a house in the Hamptons. Married his college sweetheart last year. Such a catch. Whatever happened with Michael? Such a shame that fell apart." Michael. My ex-fiancé. 3 years gone, and she still wielded his name like a blade. I gritted my teeth and placed another cracker. "We wanted different things. He's engaged now. To someone who's a better fit." Her sigh was sharp enough to cut. "Some women just know how to make it work. I suppose not everyone has that gift." I wanted to scream. Instead, I picked up the platter, my hands shaking only slightly. Back in the living room, Linda Johnson threw me a lifeline. "Your mother mentioned you just got promoted. Tell us about it." For the first time that night, I let myself glow. "Yes, I was made senior director last quarter. Our team just landed the Horizon account." "Senior manager," Mom corrected smoothly from behind me. "And only because Janine went on maternity leave." The room froze. My throat closed. Then, "Steady," I said, "Director." Janine transferred to the West Coast. It was a competitive promotion. Awkward silence. Paul Johnson laughed nervously, telling some story about his disastrous first pitch. I smiled at him like he'd just pulled me out of quicksand. But the damage was done. Everyone had seen it. The sabotage. The mother who needed me small. And that was just the appetizer. I didn't know it yet, but the real performance would come at dinner, when Mom lifted her wineglass, smiled at her guests, and called me her biggest mistake. Dinner looked like a magazine spread. Crystal glasses, polished silver, candles flickering over Mom's centerpiece of miniature pumpkins and autumn leaves. From the outside, it was perfect. From the inside, it was a stage, and I was the designated fool. At first, there was silence, the temporary truce that comes when good food keeps mouths busy. My father carved the turkey like a surgeon. The Petersons made polite noises about garlic in the mashed potatoes. Mom basked, chin lifted, eyes shining with that performative glow that always made me feel like a prop. Then came the small cuts. You've overfilled the water glasses, Penelope. Don't drag the serving dishes, lift them. Careful with the gravy, your hands shake when you pour. All of it delivered with a smile for the guests, arrows aimed only at me. I tried to steady my breath. 5 things you see. 4 you can touch. 3 you can hear. My therapist's grounding trick. But then she shifted the spotlight, as I knew she would. As part of our tradition, Mom announced, raising her glass, before dessert, we go around the table and share what we're thankful for. Walter Peterson said he was grateful for his health. Margaret mentioned community. The Johnsons talked about their new home. My father muttered something about the stock market. Then it was my turn. My chest tightened, but I spoke clearly. I'm thankful for personal growth, and for finding strength in difficult times. It was true, if vague. Safe. Mom nodded. Her eyes glittered like a cat's in candlelight. And then she did something she'd never done before. She stood. I'd like to offer a toast, she said, her wineglass raised high. The slur in her voice was faint, but unmistakable. She'd had too much. The room hushed. She began softly, weaving a narrative about choices and sacrifices. How she could have had a career, how she could have traveled, how she'd given it all up to be a mother. My father stared into his plate. The Petersons shifted uncomfortably. And then her gaze found me. My biggest mistake, she said, was her. The words didn't just land, they detonated. The room froze. Linda Johnson's hand shot to her husband's arm. Margaret gasped. Walter looked toward the ceiling like he was begging for God himself to intervene. Mom kept going, voice rising, glass trembling with each swing. Do you know what it's like to pour everything into a child who never appreciates it? Who runs off to Boston instead of staying close to family? Who drives away perfectly good men because she's too selfish to make it work? She gestured at me with her glass, red wine sloshing over the rim. 32 years old, no husband, no children, a rented apartment, and a job that keeps her too busy for real relationships. Look at her. Every word was a scalpel, slicing where she knew it would hurt. She mocked my dress, my choices, even the fine lines near my eyes. And when she finally sat, smirking as if she had just won something, silence fell like a curtain. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. The old reflex screamed, shrink, disappear, apologize. But beneath the shame, something else stirred. Something older. The promise I'd once made to myself, someday I'll stand up to her. That someday was now. Deliberately, I placed my napkin on the table. My hands no longer shook. I stood, mirroring her earlier stance, but I held a water glass, not wine. I wanted clarity, not fog. I'd like to respond, I said. The room was silent, all eyes on me. Mom's smirk twitched, she expected tears, maybe a dramatic exit. Not this. For 32 years, I have twisted myself into knots trying to earn your love, Mom. I've apologized for taking up space, for breathing wrong, for never being enough. I've carried your criticisms like scripture. Her face froze. But tonight, in front of witnesses, you showed the truth. You don't want a daughter, you want a mirror. And when I refused to be your reflection, you called me your mistake. I let the words sink in. The guests shifted in their seats, horror plain on their faces. My job? I manage a multi-million-dollar portfolio and lead a team who respect me. My apartment? Overlooks the Charles River, and I built every piece of that life myself. The men you claim I drove away? They weren't partners, they were placeholders. And I deserve better. My voice grew steadier with each word. I felt taller, stronger, like I was finally breathing full air. For years, I thought if I tried harder, achieved more, looked prettier, you would finally be proud. But the truth is, you will never celebrate me. Because you can't. And that has nothing to do with me, and everything to do with you. I turned to the guests. I'm sorry you had to hear this. No one should have their holiday ruined by such cruelty. Then back to her. You've just lost your last defender, Mom. I'm done being your punching bag. Until you can face what you've done and make real change, you don't get me in your life. Her chair scraped violently as she stood. How dare you speak to me this way in my own home? This is exactly the ungrateful, dramatic behavior I was describing. But her fury no longer cut me. It confirmed me. That response, I said quietly, tells me everything I need to know. I picked up my purse, slung on my coat. My heels echoed against the hardwood as I walked to the door. Behind me, the guests sat frozen. Mom's voice rose, frantic now, trying to spin my exit into proof of my instability. I opened the door, cool November air rushing in. I looked back once. She was glaring, desperate, her glass still trembling. Goodbye, Mom, I said. Enjoy your dessert. And then I walked out, leaving the wreckage behind me. For the first time in my life, I didn't look back. The hotel room smelled faintly of bleach and stale carpet when I collapsed on the bed that night, but to me it was freedom. I sat there in my burgundy dress, makeup still perfect, my hands trembling as the adrenaline bled out of my body. I had done it. I had stood up to her. Not perfectly, not calmly, not like the heroine of some novel, but I had spoken the words she had spent my entire life trying to suffocate. And once they were out, they couldn't be shoved back in. The tears came then. Not the hot, shameful ones of childhood, but tears that felt like release. Years of swallowing my voice, years of bending, apologizing, tiptoeing, pouring out of me in heaving sobs that tasted like salt and relief. When I finally looked at my phone, it was lit with missed calls. My mother, of course. Unknown numbers, probably her friends, sent as messengers. And one text that stopped me cold. Linda Johnson. I am so sorry for what happened tonight. What your mother said was unforgivable. The way you responded was remarkable. Please know we saw you. We believe you. It shouldn't have mattered so much, but it did. For decades, Mom made me feel like my reality was an exaggeration. To have a near stranger witness it, and validate it, was proof I wasn't crazy. Proof I wasn't alone. The next morning, my father called. His voice was low, careful, like he was handling a fragile object. Your mother is upset, he said, the understatement of the century. What she said was inappropriate. Cruel, I corrected. Silence stretched. Finally, he exhaled. Yes. Cruel. It was the first time he had ever admitted it out loud. But when he asked me to come back, to talk things through, I said no. Not now. Maybe not ever. He didn't argue. He only said, I understand, and hung up. The texts from Mom shifted with whiplash speed, rage, how dare you embarrass me, guilt, after all I sacrificed for you, manipulation, your father is so disappointed. Once, they would have gutted me. Now, I read them with detachment, watching the hooks fall uselessly in front of me. Finally, I blocked her number. It wasn't forever, I told myself. It was oxygen. Space to breathe without choking on her voice. The weeks that followed were brutal, and beautiful. I cried in therapy. I raged on long walks. I grieved for a mother I never really had. But beneath the grief was something new, space. Without her in my head, I found room for myself. At work, I threw myself into campaigns and crushed them. My boss noticed. You're sharper, she said. More present. Whatever happened at Thanksgiving, it looks good on you. Friends noticed too. I laughed more. I slept better. I stopped triple-checking every word that came out of my mouth. And then, slowly, I opened my heart again. His name was Ryan. We met at a charity auction, of all places, both reaching for the same silent auction pen. He listened to me, really listened. And when I told him about my family, he didn't flinch or pity me. He said, "That took courage." Just that. Enough to make me believe I wasn't broken. 6 months later, my father called again. We met for lunch in Boston. He was smaller than I remembered, older, with guilt etched into the lines of his face. "I failed you," he admitted over a bowl of clam chowder. "I let her control everything. I thought silence was safety. But silence was betrayal." I nearly dropped my spoon. My father, the man who hid behind newspapers, was finally speaking. Not enough to rewrite the past, but enough to show he was trying. For the first time, I saw a sliver of possibility, a relationship with him that existed outside her shadow. Fragile, but real. 1 year later, on Thanksgiving Day, I stood in my own kitchen. The table wasn't perfect. The plates didn't match, the centerpiece was just a scatter of gourds and candles from the farmer's market. The turkey was a little too brown. But the laughter of my friends, my chosen family, filled the room like music. When it was my turn to give thanks, I raised my glass. "I'm thankful for all of you," I said, my voice steady. "For teaching me what real love looks like. And I'm thankful for myself, for finally speaking my truth." They clinked glasses. The sound was warm, imperfect, real. Later, after the dishes were cleared and the last guest had gone home, I stood alone in the quiet. The candles still flickered. The house smelled like cinnamon and sage. I thought of her. Of the dining room a year ago, her glass raised, her words cutting me open. And then I thought of me now. My own glass raised, my voice clear, my life mine. That was the revenge. Not screaming at her. Not breaking her down. But breaking free. Because sometimes revenge isn't fire. It's air. The simple, quiet act of breathing without permission. I blew out the last candle, smiled into the dark, and whispered to myself. "We're okay now. Finally okay." And for the first time I believed it.